Welcome to Professionals and Coffee, where we delve into the world of integrated marketing and public relations. I'm your host, Carolina Salinas, and today we have a special guest with you, Vanessa Foy, Integrated Content Director at Apex Public Relations. Joining with me is Anchita Singla, a passionate communications enthusiast with a knack of storytelling and a freshly brewed perspective from George University Public Relations program. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's dive right in, Vanessa. You have had an impressive career journey with experience across various roles and agencies in the industry. Can you share with our listeners a bit about your background and how you started in the industry?
Sure. I was inspired to enter the PR career, like PR as a career, because I was fascinated with celebrity culture and I wanted to work on red carpets. So I was just a high school girl with a dream. And also, quite frankly, it seemed like PR was one of the industries where it involved everything I was relatively good at. I was a decent writer. I was a good speaker. And I didn't really have any other skills, to be honest with you. I didn't excel at math or science, so I knew that I wanted to go into a field that was more language focused. So I entered the PR program at the University of Guelph Humber. So I did the 4-year media studies degree and the PR diploma from Humber, and it was condensed into a 4-year program, and they've changed the program quite a bit since I graduated in 2009, which feels like a lifetime ago. But as part of that program, we had to do 2 internships. The first one was in our 3rd year, and it had to be at a not-for-profit. So I did mine with the Canadian Cancer Society, and then in my 4th year, I had to do a 4-month-long internship that was full-time, and that's where I really carved out my career path. So I went and interned at an agency called Homes PR, which specialized in arts and entertainment. So it was really like my dream agency to be starting in. So they worked with clients like the Juno Awards. We did the Genie Awards and Gemini Awards, which are now the Canadian Screen Awards. We worked on a number of different television shows, and it was great. I loved it. Except you're probably too young, Anjita, to remember what happened in 2009, but it was a bit of a recession. And so my school year, we were all really struggling to find work. So after my internship ended, I didn't get hired. They really just didn't need the full-time staff. And so I went out to look for another internship just because I wanted to keep gaining some experience in the industry rather than just working full-time at Starbucks, which was my part-time job at the time. So what I did was I did another completely unpaid internship because also things have changed a lot since 2009, and a lot of the internships that we were being offered as students and recent graduates were completely unpaid. So it was really challenging for a lot of students who weren't living with their parents, maybe were from outside of Canada and having to pay rent. But I was lucky. I lived with my parents and I just tried to get as much experience as possible. But that was another 4-month internship and there was no job at the end again. So I had now 8 months of experience at 2 really great agencies, and no job. And so I was kind of at a crossroads and thought that I would maybe become a manager at Starbucks, at least for a little while. Like no one was hiring. It was a really bleak time economically. So much so that a lot of my friends from PR school didn't end up working in PR. But I was really lucky. I applied for a account coordinator position at an agency called DW Communications, which now no longer exists, but they were very focused on theater and arts PR. So I interviewed there, and I actually didn't get the job. I was told that I came second, um, and that the person that they hired over me was just a little bit more experienced. And at that point, I was absolutely defeated. I was like, okay, I really gave PR my best shot, but maybe it's not in the, like, maybe the universe wishes something else for me. And then precisely 4 weeks later, I got a call from the woman who owned the company, and the person they hired instead of me got hit by a car and broke her hip. And as a result, I got hired in this for this job, which, even looking back at it now, was so crazy, and obviously quite devastating for the person who lost the job as a result of this accident. But I can honestly say I would not be where I am today if that crazy thing didn't happen and then I got this position. And so it was a really small agency. It was me and the owner and an intern of my choosing. And I was there for about 6 months before I found out that the original agency that I'd interned at, Homes PR, was hiring. And that was my dream agency. I could not give up that opportunity. So I was lucky enough to get hired there. And I worked there for 7 years. And I absolutely loved it. I had the opportunity to work on Cirque du Soleil, Fan Expo for all like the comic sci-fi folks out there. Toronto Comic Con, I worked with the AGO. We also did Canada's Walk of Fame. So basically all the major arts and culture companies and brands in Canada, the biggest ones, I had the opportunity to work with there, which was really exciting. And looking back at why I had entered the field of PR, it was like I was checking all of the boxes, and I was so lucky because I was still in my 20s at that point. And so I just felt really fulfilled in my career for a long time, until I had I had come to the realization that if I wanted to continue to push myself and learn and try new things, that I needed to try something different. So doing arts and culture PR was really great media relations experience. However, at the time, it was 2017, the PR industry was really rapidly shifting. So there was a lot more influencers in the mix. There was a lot more social media campaigns, yet the agency that I was working at was still relying heavily on media relations. And it was because we could. There was still a lot of media that were covering the work that we were doing in an earned capacity, but we were also seeing at the time that, newsrooms were downsizing. Uh, the volume of reporters that were dedicated to arts and culture were starting to diminish. There was a lot more syndicated coverage. So as much as I loved it there, I really needed to push myself out of my comfort zone. And one thing that was really rare about Homes PR was that all of the people that I had started working with that were above me when I started were still there when I left, which is so rare for an agency environment, but it also made me realize that I wanted to learn from some new people as well. It was a fairly small agency. It was about 10 to 12 people at any given time. So I um I felt like I waded into the deep end with no life jacket. When moving on to working at a bigger, more corporate agency. So from there, I went to Ketchum, and I was a director at Homes PR, but I took a senior consultant position at Ketchum, which was a couple levels down, but I knew it was the right decision because I was going to be learning some new strategies and working with doing some influencer marketing, advertorial, and things like that I didn't have as much experience with. So I did that, and I was at Ketchum for a year and a half, and then while I was there, a more corporate agency actually bought out Homes PR. And so I shifted and then started working at that agency because they had a lot of corporate clients, but then they absorbed all of the arts and culture clients that Homes already had. And so it was kind of like I had the opportunity to have the best of both worlds. And so there I had the chance to work on Cirque du Soleil again, but I also had the opportunity to work with clients like American Express Global Business Travel, which I had never I hadn't worked with clients that were as corporate before. So um that was really fantastic until the pandemic hit and we were really not suited to survive a pandemic. So um the the office shut down and I was also 5 months pregnant at the time. So I went from the pandemic into maternity leave. And then when I returned, I went to an agency called Butter PR, which specialized in food and consumer packaged goods, um, and was there for about a year and a half until I moved over to Apex. And at Apex, I'm an integrated account director, and I have the opportunity to work across both corporate and consumer clients. And it really has been a fantastic experience. That was a really long-winded answer, and I'm sure you probably have follow-up questions, but I hope that was helpful.
No, that was really helpful. I think I can relate to you because the job situation right now is really tricky. Like a lot of my friends from last course have already left the city here, and because of the same thing that there are no jobs available right now. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So that sounds like quite the journey, Vanessa. Your role as an integrated account director involves overseeing integrated marketing campaigns for the clients. Can you walk us through what a typical day looks like for you in this role?
On a typical day, I would do everything from um, really like I manage a number of different client accounts. So I would work with teams to manage client calls, to put together plans, to give my internal teams direction on things that need to be done and next steps, review work that's submitted to me, whether that be pitches, sometimes press releases, plans, and things like that. But also, I work a lot on new business as well. So sometimes it's putting together um, strategies for potential clients as part of the process of competing for like a it's called an RFP process, but like a request for proposal process. But then also it really is sometimes you walk in and you think you have an idea of what your day might look like, and then there's some curveballs. Sometimes clients request things where we all of a sudden have to put together a report, or with a lot of our clients, we also are really closely following the news and seeing like, okay, this just was announced, we should pitch this, and we're strategizing how we can get some earned coverage as a result of news flow and things like that.
Yeah, I think that you have provided a kind of the answer that based on the next question, because working tips is the key. So collaboration is key in integrated marketing, isn't it? With various teams and departments working together to execute campaigns seamlessly. What is your opinion on this, and how do you ensure communication and coordination among different teams to ensure success?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think putting together really integrated communications plans, or we can call them like 360 communications plans, is more important than ever. I think the media industry is changing so much, and as a result, our jobs are changing so much. So it's become really important for us not to solely rely on media relations for any of our clients, and really make sure that our campaigns integrate a number of different activities. So for any given client, maybe that's some traditional media relations. I don't think that that's ever going to go away. And we find that that's something that clients are still really looking for. And then it's also integrating influencer campaigns, um, things like mailers, paid programming with influencers and securing paid content, as well as um, social campaigns. I think that a lot of brands that really integrate everything together are the ones that have the best and most successful campaigns where everyone's really working hand in hand. So what we find is that across our clients, there's a lot of integration with the other agencies that they're working with. Maybe it's their ad agency, who's also doing like a digital out of home campaign. They're also doing social ads and things like that, and making sure that the strategy and the creative and the approach is all all integrated throughout. I think when we look at how consumers are interacting with brands, they're really expecting brands to communicate with them across a variety of channels. And I think that also they're looking for that messaging and also that brand personality to be the same across all of these channels as well, right? And when we think about the best brands, it's the ones that we feel like we know who they are and how they communicate and what they stand for. And so it's really important that when we're looking at communication strategies that we think of it cohesively in that way so that we can tell a really strong brand story.
So, Vanessa, building and maintaining strong relationships is very important in this industry, no doubt. What strategies do you use to foster trust and long term relationships with your clients, journalists, and the other media outlets? So, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm gonna start with media first because I think it will segue well into what I have to say about clients. With media, I think the most important thing that you can do to build relationships is to take the time to come to them with really um, thoughtful pitches and ideas. So media get hundreds of emails a day, and it can make their job really difficult. Like, imagine getting 1,000 emails a day. That might be your whole day, is just sifting through your inbox and sort of picking and choosing what's useful to you. So what we can do to make their jobs easier, which ultimately builds trust, is to come to them with really strong pitch angles. And to do that, we need to be informed on what they're writing about and what they might be interested in, and also um, be able to tell a really good story with our pitches. So I would say, first off, it's important to make sure that the media you're pitching, you're looking to see what they're writing about. Because also, if you're pitching them something and they covered it 2 days ago, they're not going to cover it again. Um, but also, by reading or watching what they're writing or what they're putting out there, you can also come to them and say, hey, I saw you covered this the other day, and as a result, I thought that you would be really interested in this. Um, because also I think media are just like any average person. They're flattered when you are very dialed in to their work, and it also shows that you've taken the time. So I think that's really important. And then as a secondary aspect to that, being able to write a really strong pitch and knowing what's going to be important to them. So things like timeliness, having a really credible source or credible data and things like that, and also making sure it's topical, it's relevant, is really critical. So I am always of the mind that if you take the time to pitch 5 media versus send out a mass pitch to 20 media, you're far more likely to get more coverage from the 5 media than you are the 20. Because it's really tailored and it's really thoughtful and also respectful. There are people that are doing a job, and we're expected to, I mean, it's really important that we're collaborators, right? So I always think of media as like our um colleagues, because we really rely on each other in many ways, and the information that we give them is a tool for them to do their job.
Looking ahead, what do you envision the future trends and challenges in integrated marketing, and how do you prepare yourself and your team for the changes? How do you adapt to the changes?
I remember when I was an intern and a coordinator, and so much of my job was building media lists. The length of media lists then, in comparison to what they look like now, um, is quite shocking. In terms of back then, we just had so many more newspapers and radio outlets, and there was less syndication, meaning like with the Post Media Network, you secure a story and it runs across the whole chain, which is good and bad. It's good that if you get it, it's like hitting the jackpot. But if your story gets declined, it means that you're not getting in any of those newspapers, right? So it's challenging. So really when we look at building a strategy for our clients, we really think about, um, okay, what else can we build in to ensure that there's a really strong mix of tactics and that we're also reaching consumers in many different ways. Because also when we think about uh, Gen Z, for example, um, you know, they're not listening to the radio as much as my parents are, right? It's a different generation. I still listen to 6080 News religiously. I love 680 News, but at the same time, am I listening to top 40 stations? I'm not. I'm putting on podcasts. I'm listening to you know, I'm just listening to like I'm streaming music. I'm not really listening to the radio. And so many of the channels that we once relied on are different, and depending who we're looking to reach, we need to make sure that we're meeting our audience where they're at. And so a lot of the work that we do, um we need to make sure it reflects that. So where does Gen Z spend most of their time? I mean, millennials, where do millennials even spend most of their time? It's on TikTok, it's on Instagram. And so making sure that we're really activating across all of those areas. And then, if we're looking to reach my parents, they're still important, that we're also then integrating outreach to the channels that they're on too. But honestly, I think my mom spends more time on Instagram than I do. So uh there's that.
Vanessa, finding your niche in the PR industry can be tricky. Can you share your journey in discovering your niche within the PR landscape, and what advice do you have for others starting out in the industry?
Absolutely. The thing that you set out to do, um, you don't always love. Like I know I started this chat saying that I wanted to work red carpets. That was my end goal and that was my dream. And then I worked my very first red carpet and I absolutely hated it. I found it so aggressive. And I'm not a really aggressive person by nature, and I was like, "Wow, okay, my eyes have been opened a little bit, and maybe what I thought I loved, I actually is not for me." And I think that, I'm a huge advocate for PR agency work. I've only worked, in PR agencies across my whole career. But I think what's great about that is that it gives you a lot of insight into what you enjoy, what you don't, what you're good at, what you maybe thought you would be good at and aren't, and the reverse to that as well. I remember when I worked at Ketchum, we had a tax client, and I was really nervous because, as I mentioned, I am unskilled in math and things like that, and I didn't really know that much about taxes. And then I started working with this client, and I absolutely loved it. Like, till this day, it was one of my favorite client experiences, and it really surprised me.
Thank you very much, both. Before we conclude this interview, I would like to ask you if you want to share with our audience any social media networks where can we find you?
Find me on LinkedIn and don't hesitate to send me a message. I'm friendly, I don't bite. Otherwise, After I finish work, I try not to spend too much time on my phone. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and so I don't spend too much time on social media. So LinkedIn is the place for sure. I'm Vanessa Foy on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Vanessa. And what about you, Anchita? Where can we find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Anchita Singla, and you can also find me on Instagram. So it's Anchita Singla for Instagram as well.
Okay, well, that concludes our conversation with Vanessa Foy, Integrated Account Director at Apex Public Relations. Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and podcast platforms for more episodes, and join us next time as we explore more topics in the world of public relations. Until then, take care and bye-bye.